Hi, I'm Matt from Garden and Tackle, and I'm here on the banks of a lake filming the first part of a series of videos that we're going to be doing to show different methods and trying to catch a carp in a day. Each video will be based around its own specific theme. So we've picked a venue that's got lots of different features. It's got overhanging trees, it's got snags, reeds, open water, lots of pads around the edge as well, and they do like a floater. So later on, when the weather's a bit better, we'll be doing some floater fishing, hopefully. But for the purpose of this one, we're going to be concentrating on spring fishing. Now, the venue that we're at, it's got stock of mostly commons, but there are maybe a dozen old mirrors, very old mirrors in here. There's one, just stuck its head out right in the middle. Really subtle, just here. Not even halfway across. You won't see a sign of it. That was just a classic. It's bubbling up now. Now, one of my favourite ways of fishing in the spring, oh, it's done it again, is single hook bait fishing. What it allows me to do is cast. If I see a fish show, I can just get a bait on it straight away. And as I've got nothing invested in where it was before, I've got no qualms about reeling in and just repositioning the bait. I've just seen a fish stick its head out twice. So try and overcast it rather than drop right on it. Cast past it, long way past, and then I can just reel in across the top. Just drop the bait down with minimal disturbance. I'll just get the bobbin clips on, and then I'll tell you what I've done with the other two rods. Now, when I got down this morning, I did a good walk round. Saw fish in various areas, a few bubbling up, but did see quite a few in the reeds that are on the opposite bank. So I'm fishing over towards the reeds, but in typical spring fashion, I've not got a lot of bait out, so I've just got a scattering of maybe 30 or 40 baits across the front of the reeds, which enables me to move the rods about as I see fit, knowing that I'll still be on an area where there might be some bait. First thing I did, in fact, was to get a few boilies out, just to encourage them to leave the reeds. It's still fairly cold, and reeds offer a little bit of protection, a little bit of warmth. So the fish will come out of the reeds come springtime. They'll often sit in them all winter, but they'll come out in the spring. But they'll tend to go back in there, often at night, and then come out for a little mooch in the day. So I just wanted to put a bit of bait out early on, just to encourage them to come out and give them a reason to leave the reeds. So having put a scattering of boilies out, I've positioned two rods over towards the reeds. Now I've got one probably 2 lengths short of the reeds, 2 rod lengths short, and the other one's a little further off because they do like to move around a lot in this lake, and particularly as that's what happens a lot in spring. When the fish start moving about, they tend to move over the whole of the lake. And I'm not saying they get around the whole lake every day, but they will be exploring, looking for areas of shelter, looking for where the next food larder is going to emerge from, and not familiarising themselves with the surroundings. They may have been laid up for quite a while, especially in a water like this that's fairly deep. And so as soon as it's like time, the hours of daylight are getting longer, water starts to warm up, they can function a bit better, and they do start becoming very active. So it's very rare that they'll all be in one spot together, and they will travel, probably more so than they will at any other time of year. Oh, that was one. Rod length off the reeds, what is now my middle rod. And one of the most important aspects, I think, of fishing in springtime is the fact that the carp are really, really mobile. And I would say they're probably more mobile at this time of year than they are at any other time. They've probably been dormant or semi-dormant for a while through the winter, not moving about that much. They might be holed up in reed beds or old weed beds, and they're not moving around as much as they normally would. As soon as the water temperature rises, but I think equally important is the levels of light. As soon as they start to increase, they start moving about a lot more, and they'll be using the whole lake. Probably looking for areas of sanctuary. Oh, we're in. front of the mirrors. Yes. Beautiful. That's a right result. That bite was one of the really old sought after mirrors that are in here. And I'll show you that in a moment. I'll just finish off what I was saying. I think I was talking about how springtime, especially early spring, fish are really moving about and traveling around the lake an awful lot. So what in essence that means is that I need to be as mobile as they are. I need to watch the water, and it's not just about watching it before I set up. It's about getting on fish in the first place, but equally as important is staying on them throughout my session. So that means keeping an eye on the water and keeping in touch with what's happening and what the fish are doing, and making sure that I move if they move, so responding to their movements. Typical spring tactics, white pop-up, fished over a wide scattering of just a handful of baits. Exactly 24 pound. Yep. Lovely. So that's the proof that a sparing baiting approach is a solid tactic for springtime. And on this occasion, it's rewarded me with one of the jewels of the lake. When it comes to rigs for spring fishing, I'm a big fan of pop-ups, and I like those pop-ups to be well off the bottom. Spring carp's sense of eyesight isn't necessarily at its most effective, especially early on in the spring when the water temperatures are lower. So I want something that's very visual and not up off the bottom in front of them where it's going to get noticed. Now, the two rigs that I use for that are the chod or the hinge rig. My hinge rig I can set at various heights, but I'll normally set this probably 1.5 inches or up to 2.5 inches off the bottom, just to make sure it's right up in front of the carp's face and easily noticed. The thing that both these rigs have in common is the material that I use for the end section or for the entirety of the chod rig. I want something that's really stiff, but that holds a curve very well. So I can shape it and then it stays in position, like curved over at an aggressive angle. So it's something I need a material that's got very high memory. And my choice for this is stiff link. I'm most often using a size 4 or 5 hook. So I can use the 25-pound breaking strain, which has got the best and stiffest qualities, because it is a very thick mono. If I go down to a size 6, then I'll drop down to 20-pound breaking strain, and even down to a 15 if I was using a size 8 hook. Some people prefer the clear, but my favourite is the green tinted colour. Now the hook that I use for pretty much all my pop-up fishing, and particularly for my hinges and my chod rigs, is the BCR. Now it's a beat chod rig pattern, however the beak is very, very subtle. So it's not like an aggressive curve like a lot of beat hooks are. So it's still got very good grab and hold qualities, but it's also got the other qualities I'd look for in a beaked hook, as in they hold on just a little bit better than straight pointed hooks. So if I'm on the water where I've got to use barbless hooks, I think they just hold in a little bit better, especially if you have to let line go slack. If you're like fishing in weed or something like that, you've got fish weeded up and you have to slacken off. I'm happier with a beaked pattern than I am with the straight pointed pattern. They've got an extra large eye, which is really good when using like stiff rig materials, because you can get the line through there 3 times with a knotless knot, and the wire gauge is upgraded, so they're a proper strong hit and hold hook. One other thing of note is that they come in a box, so each hook clips in, which prevents the hooks from rubbing against each other and protects their super sharp points. To go hand in hand with my high pop-up presentations, I like to use very in-your-face hook baits. Carp's sense of eyesight is somewhat dulled in low water temperatures, which we still get, you know, certainly in early spring and through the spring. So they're not at their most efficient. So it's important that I use a hook bait that they can see and that like catches their attention. Additionally, I want one that's got a lot of smell behind it as well. So it's not just visual, their sense of smell, their olfactory senses, they're somewhat dulled as well. So I want something that's very highly flavoured and very bright in colour. Although I've done really well on whites and yellows, I wouldn't say there's any one particular colour that I would say is the best colour for spring fishing. So what I tend to do when choosing my colours is to fish with a range of colours until I know what's working on that particular water. So I may have one rod on a red, one on a white, one on a yellow, And should I get a bite on one of those, I might change a second rod over to that same colour. If I got another bite, I'd have all three on that colour. It's all about just trying different things until you can work out what's working. Conversely, if I'd got all three on one colour and then bites had dried up, then I might think about putting one back on an alternative colour. Now, the way I like to introduce a little bit of extra flavour into my hook baits is to give them a tiny glaze. I'll make up a little mix of some sweetener, maybe a little bit of liquid food, and some neat flavour, just to coat the pot of pop-ups. So it might only be 1 ml that goes in one pot of pop-ups. Give them a good shake and then let them soak it in. I've used all sorts of flavours really in the spring, but I've found probably the best success has come from fruity flavours. Now, as far as location goes for spring fishing, I will always go on what I see, or what I see and hear in the lake. Observation is key. Spring carp are moving about all the time, and so I need to keep my eyes peeled and keep looking. There will be times when it's very difficult to see, it might be windy or whatever, and you can't see any signs of fish. So what I would say, as far as advice to go on where to concentrate your efforts for looking, would be to head for what I would call summer areas. And it doesn't seem to matter how cold it is, once those carp are awake for the spring, 9 times out of 10 they'll be visiting the summer haunts. So that might be tops of bars, it might be reed beds, margins, but I would definitely concentrate my efforts on the summer areas rather than those winter holes out in the middle. Now, spring carp can be very, very obliging, and you might see them quite a lot. They're moving about a lot, they're showing, and it can be tempting to think that they're really hungry and ready to feed. 9 times out of 10 that's not the case. They will eat, but their digestion isn't functioning fully, so they'll often eat small quantities. The last thing you want to be doing really is filling it in. A handful of baits around each rod, you know, like 30 baits around each one is something that a tactic I use quite a lot. Single hook baits, that's an excellent spring tactic, especially early on in the spring. Just no freebies whatsoever, just a single hook bait, a scattering of a few boilies, or maybe a little PVA trap, something like a stick mix or a little bag of pellets, something like that. It's far more, not guaranteed to get you a bite, but it's a far more reliable tactic than fishing over a lot of bait. Hopefully, I've shown you that my spring tactics can work, and hopefully you'll be able to take something from this video and apply it to your own fishing. Next time, we'll be at the same water, trying to catch carp in a completely different way.